Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ebon Court. The fog clung to London streets like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the hum of early motor cars. In his modest yet impeccably tidy flat at Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat at his breakfast table, a cup of tisane steaming gently before him. His grey eyes, sharp as polished steel, scanned a letter that had arrived with the morning post. The envelope of thick cream paper bore a crest embossed with a raven clutching a key. The handwriting was precise, almost too perfect, as though the writer feared revealing their soul through a stray flourish. "Monsieur Poirot," the letter began, "your reputation as a man of unparalleled deductive prowess precedes you. I humbly request your presence at Ebon Court, my estate in the Sussex Downs, for a gathering of singular importance. A matter of great consequence, involving 7 keys and an ancient trust, demands your clarity of mind. Arrive by the evening train on the 15th. Discretion is paramount. Yours, Lord Reginald Ashby." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle signal of his intrigue. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, setting the letter down with care. "This Lord Ashby. He does not beg, yet he does not command. He intrigues. And these 7 keys, what mystery do they unlock?" He glanced at Captain Hastings, who lounged in an armchair, flipping through the Times with the enthusiasm of a man awaiting a dentist's appointment. "Hastings, my friend," Poirot said, his voice carrying the lilt of barely suppressed excitement, "what do you know of Ebon Court?" Hastings lowered the newspaper, his brow furrowing. "Ebon Court? Can't say I step heard of it, Poirot. Somewhere in Sussex, you say? Sounds like one of those gloomy old piles, draughty halls, ghostly legends, that sort of thing." "Précisément," Poirot replied, tapping the letter. "And yet, this invitation, it is not for a weekend of shooting grouse or sipping port. No. There is a puzzle here. Hastings and Poirot, he is summoned to solve it." By noon, Poirot had made inquiries through discreet channels. Lord Reginald Ashby was a reclusive widower, known for his wealth and eccentricity, whose family had owned Ebon Court for centuries. The manor was whispered to house relics of obscure provenance, though society gossip offered little beyond tales of vanished guests and locked rooms. Poirot, ever skeptical of hearsay, packed his valise with precision, ensuring his silver-backed brushes and a spare pair of patent leather shoes were included. "One must be prepared," he told Hastings, "for the unexpected." The train to Sussex wound through mist-shrouded hills, and by dusk Poirot alighted at a lonely platform where a chauffeured Rolls-Royce awaited. The driver, a taciturn man with eyes like chipped flint, spoke only to confirm Poirot's name before guiding him to the car. The journey to Ebon Court was silent, save for the crunch of gravel beneath the tires as they approached a wrought-iron gate flanked by stone ravens. Ebon Court loomed against the twilight, its Gothic spires piercing the fog like the claws of some ancient beast. The manor's facade, weathered yet grand, seemed to watch Poirot's arrival with indifference. As he stepped from the car, the front door creaked open, revealing a butler whose gaunt face and impeccable livery suggested both servitude and secrets. "Monsieur Poirot," the butler intoned, bowing slightly, "Lord Ashby awaits you in the drawing-room." The interior of Ebon Court was a study in contrasts. Opulent chandeliers gleamed above faded tapestries, and the air carried the mingled scents of beeswax and damp stone. Poirot's sharp eyes noted every detail: the portraits of stern-faced Ashbys, the locked cabinets along the hall, the faint scuff on the floor, suggesting a hidden panel. He adjusted his tie, his mind already cataloguing possibilities. In the drawing-room, a fire crackled, casting shadows across 6 strangers seated in a semicircle. Lord Ashby, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that burned with quiet intensity, rose to greet him. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as aged brandy, "your presence honors us. Allow me to introduce my guests." The introductions were brief, but telling. Miss Clara Vane, a novelist with a sharp tongue and sharper gaze, clutched a cigarette holder as though it were a weapon. Dr. Edmund Lyle, a historian with ink-stained fingers, fidgeted with his spectacles. Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, a widow draped in mourning black, wore a smile that did not reach her eyes. Mr. Julian Trent, a financier with a predator's charm, lounged with calculated ease. Miss Sophie Durand, a French violinist, seemed distracted, her fingers tracing invisible strings. And Colonel Rupert Blake, retired, sat ramrod straight, his military bearing at odds with his nervous glance toward the door. 7 guests, Poirot noted aloud, his eyes narrowing. And 7 keys, nets pass. Lord Ashby Sitters, lips curved faintly. "Perceptive, Monsieur Poirot. Tomorrow I shall explain the purpose of our gathering, the legacy of the 7 keys. But tonight we dine, we converse, and we rest. The truth, I assure you, will not wait long." As the group moved to the dining room, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on a locked iron box mounted above the fireplace. Its surface bore the same raven and key crest as the letter. A chill ran through him, not from the draughty hall, but from the certainty that Eben Court held secrets that would test even his little grey cells. "Qui testest interessant," he whispered to himself, stroking his moustache. "The game. It has begun. 1 chapter done. And the mystery has only just begun. Tell me, dear listener, where in the world are you joining us from? Leave your city below and subscribe now, because the next chapter may hold the first real clue." Chapter 2. The 7 Guardians. The dining room of Eben Court was a cavern of grandeur, its long mahogany table gleaming under the weight of silver candelabra and crystal goblets. The walls, panelled in dark oak, seemed to absorb the flickering candlelight, casting shadows that danced like conspirators plotting in silence. Hercule Poirot, seated to the right of Lord Reginald Ashby, observed his fellow guests with the precision of a watchmaker assembling a delicate mechanism. Each face, each gesture, was a cog in the puzzle that had begun to form in his mind. The meal was lavish roast pheasant, asparagus in hollandaise, and a claret that Poirot sipped with measured approval, but the conversation was stilted, as though the guests were actors in a play who had forgotten their lines. Miss Clara Vane, the novelist, broke the silence with a laugh that cut the air like a shard of glass. "Lord Ashby," she said, waving her cigarette holder, "you've gathered us here like characters in one of my novels, but you've yet to reveal the plot. What are these 7 keys you've hinted at?" All eyes turned to their host, who sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the candlelight like a halo. Lord Ashby's expression was unreadable, but his fingers, long and pale, toyed with the stem of his wine-glass. "Patience, Miss Vane," he replied, his voice smooth yet edged with something Poirot could not yet name, caution perhaps, or fear. "The keys are no mere trinket. They are the heart of a legacy, one that binds each of you to Eben Court in ways you may not yet understand." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his growing curiosity. "Pardonnez-moi, Lord Ashby," he interjected, his voice soft but commanding attention. "But this legacy, It is not a simple matter of inheritance, n'est-ce pas? There is a mystery here, a purpose that brings together such diverse company. His grey eyes swept the table, noting the tightening of Colonel Blake's jaw, the faint flush on Mrs. Harrow's cheeks, and the way Miss Durand's fingers stilled on her napkin. Ashby leaned back, his gaze locking with Poirot's. "You are correct, Monsieur Poirot. Allow me to explain." He rose, gesturing to the butler, who stepped forward with a velvet-lined tray. Upon it lay 7 keys, each distinct in design, yet united by their antiquity, brass, iron and silver, some etched with runes, others adorned with intricate filigree. The guests leaned forward, their breaths catching as Ashby lifted the tray for all to see. "These," he said, "are the 7 keys of Ebon Court, forged centuries ago by my ancestors. Each key is entrusted to a guardian, chosen not by chance but by destiny. You 6, Miss Vane, Dr. Lyle, Mrs. Harrow, Mr. Trent, Miss Durand, and Colonel Blake, are the current guardians. The 7th key—" He paused, his eyes flickering to Poirot. "The 7th is mine, for I am the keeper of the trust." Dr. Edmund Lyle, the historian, adjusted his spectacles, his voice trembling with scholarly excitement. "A trust, you say? Is this some medieval covenant? I've read of such things, keys that guard relics, or perhaps a vault of sacred texts." Ashby's smile was thin. "Not quite, Dr. Lyle. The keys unlock a chamber within Ebon Court, one that has remained sealed for 300 years. What lies within is known only to the keeper, passed down through generations, but the time has come to open it, and for that all 7 keys must be united." Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, her mourning black stark against her pale skin, spoke softly, yet her words carried a weight that silenced the room. "And what happens if the keys are not united? What is the cost of this legacy?" Ashby Sitt's eyes darkened. "The cost, Mrs. Harrow, is greater than you can imagine. The trust demands loyalty. Betrayal, greed, or failure to fulfill its terms brings consequences. My ancestors learned this at great price." Poirot's fingers steepled before him, his mind racing. "Mon cher Lord Ashby, you speak of consequences, yet you do not say what lies within this chamber. A treasure? A secret? Or perhaps—" He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "A curse." A murmur rippled through the guests. Colonel Blake scoffed, his military bluster barely masking unease. "Poppycock, curses are for fairy tales, Poirot. Aesop faced real dangers. Boer War, trenches in France. Aesoping here for facts, not ghost stories." Mr. Julian Trent, the financier, leaned forward, his smile sharp as a blade. "Facts, Colonel. The fact is, we sit all here for a reason. Lord Ashby sits not the sort to waste time on whims. There sits profit in this, mark my words, profit or peril." Miss Sophie Durand, the violinist, spoke for the first time, her French accent lilting yet firm. "Profit, Monsieur Trent, or perhaps redemption. Some of us have pasts that weigh heavier than gold." Her eyes, dark and liquid, darted toward Mrs. Harrow, who looked away. Poirot noted the exchange, filing it away in the orderly chambers of his mind. "Messieurs et mesdames," he said, rising to his feet, "it is clear that each of you holds a piece of this puzzle. But tell me, Lord Ashby, why am I here? I am no guardian, no keeper. What role does Hercule Poirot play in this affair?" Ashby Sitt's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You, Monsieur Poirot, are here to ensure the trust is fulfilled. There are forces at work, forces that may seek to undermine our purpose. Your little grey cells, as you call them, are our safeguard." The room fell silent, the weight of Ashby's words settling like dust. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the flicker of unease in Miss Vane's smirk, the way Dr. Lyle's hands trembled as he reached for his glass, the rigid set of Colonel Blake's shoulders. Each guardian, it seemed, carried not only a key but a secret. As the meal concluded, Ashby raised his glass. To the 7 keys he toasted, and to the truth they will unlock. The guests echoed the toast, but Poirot noted the hesitation in their voices, the glances exchanged like coded messages. He sipped his claret, his mind already dissecting the evening's revelations. After dinner, the guests retired to the drawing-room, but Poirot lingered in the dining hall, his gaze drawn to the iron box above the fireplace, its raven and key crest glinting in the dying firelight. He approached it, his gloved fingers tracing the lock's outline. It was large enough to hold a single key, or perhaps a clue to the greater mystery. "C'est curieux," he murmured. 7 keys, 7 guardians, and yet the truth, it hides behind a lock that none can see. He turned as the butler appeared, silent as a shadow, to escort him to his room. As Poirot ascended the grand staircase, the portraits of long-dead Ashbys seemed to watch him, their eyes gleaming with secrets. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, and Poirot felt the unmistakable prickle of danger. Eben Court was no mere manor, it was a stage, and the curtain had only just risen on a drama that would test his genius to its limits. Chapter 3. The Locked Chamber. The night at Eben Court was restless, the kind of night where the wind howled secrets through the ancient eaves and the shadows seemed to whisper of treachery. Hercule Poirot, despite the plush comfort of his 4-poster bed, slept lightly, his mind turning over the puzzle of the 7 keys like a jeweller inspecting a flawed gem. The guardians, their guarded glances, Lord Ashby's cryptic words, all were pieces in a mosaic that refused to resolve. It was just past 2 in the morning when a scream shattered the silence, high and piercing, like the cry of a wounded bird. Poirot was out of bed in an instant, his silk dressing-gown tied with precision despite the hour. He seized his silver-handled walking stick, not for support but as a precaution, and stepped into the corridor. The scream had come from the west wing, where the guests' rooms were situated. As he hurried forward, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the polished floor, he was joined by Captain Hastings, who emerged from his room, hair dishevelled and eyes wide with alarm. "Good heavens, Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed, clutching a hastily donned jacket. "What was that? Sounded like someone's been murdered." "Calmez-vous, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice steady, but his eyes gleaming with urgency. "We shall see what disturbs the peace of Eben Court. Come quickly." The corridor was a labyrinth of flickering gas lamps and looming portraits, their painted eyes seeming to follow the pair as they navigated toward the source of the sound. Other doors opened, and the guests appeared, their faces a tableau of fear and suspicion. Miss Clara Vane, her auburn hair loose and her silk robe clutched tightly, demanded, "Who screamed?" "What's happened?" Dr. Edmund Lyle, spectacles askew, muttered something about ill omens. Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, pale as a ghost, leaned against the wall, her hand pressed to her heart. Julian Trent and Colonel Rupert Blake, both in dressing gowns, exchanged wary glances, while Miss Sophie Durand, clutching a shawl, whispered a prayer in French. Lord Ashby appeared last, his silver hair immaculate despite the hour, his expression one of grim resolve. "Follow me," he commanded, leading the group to a heavy oak door at the end of the corridor. The door was locked, its iron keyhole gleaming ominously in the lamplight. From within came a faint, eerie silence that chilled Poirot more than the scream had. "This is the Blue Room," Ashby said, his voice low. It was assigned to Dr. Lisle. I heard the scream from my study below. Dr. Lisle paled, his hands trembling as he fumbled in his pocket. "I pod sits in there," he stammered. "I couldn't sleep, so I went to the library to read. My key." He produced a brass key, one of the 7, its runes catching the light. "I left it on the dresser inside." Poirot Sit's eyes narrowed. Mon Dieu, a locked room and a scream. This is most irregular. Lord Ashby, do you have a master key? Ashby shook his head. The Blue Room Sipt's lock is unique. Only Dr. Lisle Sipt's key fits it. But we must get inside. He turned to the butler, who had materialized silently behind them. "Graves, fetch the tools." The butler returned with a crowbar, and Colonel Blake, with a soldier Sit's efficiency, pried the door open, the wood splintering with a groan. The group surged forward, but Poirot raised a hand. "Non, mes amis. Allow Poirot to observe first. The scene, it must not be disturbed." He stepped into the Blue Room, his senses alert. The room was opulent, with sapphire drapes and a canopied bed, but the air was heavy with the unmistakable scent of death. On the floor near the window lay Dr. Edmund Lisle, or so Poirot assumed at first glance. The man's spectacles were shattered beside him, his face frozen in a rictus of terror. His hand clutched one of the 7 keys, its silver surface smeared with blood. The window was locked from the inside, its latch rusted with age, and the door, until moments ago, had been sealed. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers probing gently. "Sit you," he murmured. "The wound, it is a single stab to the heart, precise and deep. No struggle, no signs of defense, and yet the room was locked." Hastings, peering over his shoulder, gasped, "But Poirot, if Lisle was in the library, who sits this?" Poirot Sit's gaze sharpened. "A most excellent question, Hastings. This is not Dr. Lisle." He turned to the historian, who stood trembling in the doorway. "Monsieur Lisle, you are fortunate to be among the living. But who, then, is our victim?" The group crowded closer, their faces a mix of horror and confusion. Lord Ashby stepped forward, his voice steady but strained. "That sits Victor Crane. He was my solicitor, here to advise on the trust. But why was he in Dr. Lisle Sit's room?" Poirot's eyes scanned the room, noting the undisturbed bed, the open book on the dresser, and a faint scuff mark near the fireplace. "Interessant," he said softly. "Monsieur Crane, he was not a guest, yet he is dead in a locked room, holding a key that is not his own. Lisle, you claim to have been elsewhere. We must verify this." Miss Vainsit's laugh was brittle. "Verify? You think one of us did this? That Sit's absurd. The door was locked, the window sealed. Unless you believe in ghosts, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot Sit's moustache twitched. "Ghosts, Mademoiselle Vane? None, none. Hercule Poirot believes in the little grey cells, and they tell me that this crime, it is the work of a human hand, one that is clever, but not clever enough." Colonel Blake bristled. "This is no time for riddles, Poirot. A man sits dead. We should search the house, Find the weapon, catch the blighter who did this. Patience, Colonel, Poirot said, rising. The weapon. It is likely a dagger or knife, but it is not here. The room, it tells its own story. Observe the key in Monsieur Cranesip's hand. It is not Dr. Lyle Sip's brass key, but another, perhaps one of the 7. We must know which. Ashby examined the key, his face paling. This is my key, he said quietly. The keeper sits key. I kept it in my study, locked in a safe. How did it come to be here? The group erupted in murmurs. Mrs. Harrow clutched her shawl, whispering, "The trust it suts cursed." Mr. Trentett's eyes gleamed with calculation, while Miss Durand crossed herself. Dr. Lyle, still shaken, protested, "I swear I was in the library. I saw no one." Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Mesdames, Monsieur, we have a murder, a locked room, and a key that should not be here. Each of you will account for your movements tonight. But first, we must secure this room and summon the authorities. Lord Ashby, you will ensure no one enters until the police arrive." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes returning to the scuff mark near the fireplace. He pressed the panel gently, but it did not yield. "C'est curieux," he muttered. "The locked room. It is not so locked as it seems. And the key. It is a clue. But to what?" He turned to Hastings, who hovered anxiously. "Hastings, my friend, this is no simple murder. The 7 keys, they are not merely objects. They are the heart of a conspiracy. We must tread carefully, for the killer, he is among us." The wind howled outside, and the shadows of Ebon Court seemed to close in, as if the manor itself were guarding its secrets. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, piecing together the first threads of a mystery that promised to be as intricate as it was deadly. Chapter 4. Shadows of Secrets. The morning after the murder at Ebon Court dawned grey and heavy, the Sussex Downs shrouded in a mist that seemed to mirror the uncertainty cloaking the manor's inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a charcoal suit and polished shoes, stood in the drawing-room, his hands clasped behind his back, his grey eyes scanning the faces of the 6 guardians and Lord Ashby. The air was thick with suspicion, each guessed a potential piece in the puzzle of Victor Crane's death. The police had been summoned, but the nearest constable was delayed by the fog, leaving Poirot to conduct his inquiries in the interim, a task he relished. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm yet commanding. "A man is dead, stabbed in a room locked from within, holding a key that belongs to Lord Ashby. This is no accident, no act of chance. It is murder, deliberate and cunning. Each of you, as guardians of the 7 keys, has a role in this drama. As Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth, but I require your candour. Who will speak first?" The silence was broken by Miss Clara Vane, who leaned back in her chair, her cigarette holder poised like a sceptre. "Very well, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice laced with mockery. "I'll humour you. I was in my room all night, writing my latest novel. You see, a tale of betrayal and locked rooms. Quite ironic, isn't it?" Her green eyes sparkled with defiance, but Poirot noted the faint tremble in her hand. "Mademoiselle Vane," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you are a writer of mysteries. Tell me, did you hear the scream? And this novel of yours, does it feature a key, perhaps, or a secret chamber?" Clara's smile tightened. I heard the scream, like everyone else. As for my novel, it's fiction, Monsieur Poirot. I don't stab my characters in real life." She exhaled a plume of smoke, but her gaze flickered toward Mr. Trent, who sat with the ease of a man accustomed to controlling a room. Poirot turned to the financier. "Monsieur Trent, you are a man of business, n'est-ce pas? What brought you to Eboncourt? And where were you when Monsieur Crane met his unfortunate end?" Julian Trent's smile was all teeth, a predator's charm. I was invited by Lord Ashby, like the others, to fulfill my role as a guardian. As for last night, I was in my room, reviewing some financial papers. The scream woke me, and I joined the others in the corridor. Simple enough, wouldn't you say? "Simple? Non, monsieur," Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing. "Nothing in this affair is simple. You deal in wealth, in power. Did Victor Crane, as Lord Ashby Sitt's solicitor, know something of your dealings that made him inconvenient?" Trent Sitt smiled. "Didn't, Stoiver," but his fingers tightened on the armrest. "Crane was a lawyer, not my confidant. I barely knew the man. If you sit fishing for motives, Poirot, you sit all need a better net." Poirot Sitt's moustache twitched, but he moved on to Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, who sat rigid, her black mourning dress absorbing the light. "Madame Harrow," he said gently, "you are in mourning, yet you travel to Eboncourt. Why? And where were you when the scream pierced the night?" Mrs. Harrow's eyes, red-rimmed but dry, met his. "My husband died 2 years ago, Monsieur Poirot. Lord Ashby invited me, claiming my key was tied to his legacy, a chance to honor my husband's memory. I was in my room, praying, when I heard the scream. I thought it was a nightmare, at first." Her voice broke, but Poirot noted the way her hands clutched her rosary, the beads worn smooth from overuse. "Merci, madame," Poirot said, his tone softening. "Your grief? It is heavy, but your presence here suggests strength. Did you know Monsieur Crane?" She shook her head. "Only as Lord Ashby Sitt's solicitor. He was distant, professional. I had no cause to wish him harm." Next, Poirot turned to Miss Sophie Durand, the violinist, whose delicate frame seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Durand, your music, it speaks of passion, of secrets. What brought you to this gathering, and where were you last night?" Sophie's fingers twisted in her lap, her dark eyes darting to Lord Ashby before returning to Poirot. "I was invited because of my key, which my father left me. He knew Lord Ashby's family, long ago. Last night I couldn't sleep, so I was in the music room, practicing softly. I heard the scream and came at once." "Interessant," Poirot said. "The music room. It is far from the blue room, yet you heard the scream. Your ears, they are sharp. Oui? Did you hear anything else? Footsteps, perhaps, or a door?" Sophie hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing, monsieur. Only the scream." Colonel Rupert Blake was next, his military posture unyielding despite the strain in his eyes. Colonel Poirot said, "You are a man of action, accustomed to command, yet you are a guardian of a key. What is your connection to Eboncourt, and where were you?" Blake Sett's jaw tightened. "I served with Lord Ashby Sett's father in the Boer War. He entrusted me with a key, said it was a matter of honor. Last night, I was in my room, writing letters. The scream brought me out, and that sept's all I know. I don't sept care for your insinuations, Poirot. I sept's no murderer." Non, Colonel," Poirot said, raising a hand. "I insinuate nothing. I observe. And you, Dr. Lyle, You claim to have been in the library. Can anyone confirm this? Dr. Edmund Lyle, still pale from the discovery of Crane Sip's body, adjusted his spectacles nervously. No one saw me, Monsieur Poirot. I was alone reading about medieval trusts. My room was locked, as I said, and I left my key inside. I swear I had nothing to do with this. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Curieux, Dr. Lyle. Your key was in the room. Yet another key. The Keeper 6 key was found in the dead man Sip's hand. How do you explain this? I can stit, Lyle cried, his voice cracking. I don't know how Crane got there, or why he had Lord Ashby Stitt's key. Lord Ashby, who had remained silent, spoke at last. Monsieur Poirot, I must clarify. Victor Crane was to oversee the opening of the chamber tomorrow. He knew the trust set's details, but he was not a guardian. My key was in my safe, as I said. I cannot explain how it came to be with him. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each response. Merci, Lord Ashby. Each of you has spoken, but the truth it hides in the shadows of your words. I observe the glances, the hesitations, the secrets you do not speak, the little grey cells. They are at work. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on a tapestry depicting a raven with a key in its talons. He approached it, noting a faint seam in the wall behind it. Hastings, he called softly, beckoning his friend, who had been hovering anxiously. This manor, it is full of secrets. The walls they listen, and the keys they speak. But of what? Hastings frowned. Poirot, you don't think one of them is lying, do you? They all seemed shaken, but, well, Trent sits a slippery sort, and Miss Vane sits got a sharp tongue, and Mrs. Harrow, bit too calm for my liking. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low, they are all lying in their own way. Not perhaps about the murder, but about their reasons for being here. The keys, they bind them to Ebon Court, but also to each other. We must uncover their pasts, for therein lies the motive. As they returned to the corridor, Poirot paused by the blue room, now guarded by the butler, Graves. The door was resealed, but Poirot's eyes lingered on the lock, then drifted to the floor, where a faint scratch mark caught his attention. C'est très intéressant, he murmured. The locked room? It is not so locked as it seems, and the shadows of Ebon Court, they grow darker. The mist outside thickened, and the manor seemed to settle into an uneasy silence, as if waiting for the next act of its deadly drama to unfold. Chapter 5. The Riddle of the Keys. The morning mist clung to Ebon Court like a shroud, muting the sunlight that struggled to pierce the tall, mullioned windows of the library. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's centre, his small, precise figure dwarfed by towering bookshelves laden with leather-bound tomes. The air smelled of old paper and wax polish, but there was another scent, faint yet unmistakable, tension sharp as ozone before a storm. The guardians, summoned by Poirot's request, sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, their faces a gallery of unease. Lord Ashby stood by the fireplace, his silver hair catching the firelight, while Captain Hastings hovered near Poirot, his notebook at the ready. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and measured. The murder of Monsieur Victor Crane in a locked room holding the keeper's key is but the first note in a symphony of secrets. The 7 keys, they are not mere objects, n'est-ce pas? They are tied to a purpose, a legacy. Lord Ashby, you spoke of a chamber and a trust. Now I insist You must tell us more. What is the meaning of these keys? Lord Ashby's eyes, shadowed by fatigue, met Poirot's. You are right, Monsieur Poirot. The time for half-truths is past. He crossed to a locked cabinet, producing a small iron key, not one of the 7, and withdrew a parchment, yellowed and brittle with age. The guardians leaned forward, their curiosity warring with suspicion. This, Ashby said, unfolding the parchment with care, is the riddle of the keys, written by my ancestor, Sir Alaric Ashby, in 1623. It governs the trust and the purpose of the 7 keys. He cleared his throat and read aloud, his voice resonant yet tinged with unease. 7 keys, by Ravensit's flight. Guard the heart of endless night. 1 to bind, 1 to free, 1 to hide what none should see, 4 to hold the truth in stone. Together they unlock the throne. Betray the trust, and blood shall fall. The Ravensit's curse shall claim them all. A chill settled over the room, unbroken even by the crackle of the fire. Miss Clara Vane, her cigarette unlit for once, arched an eyebrow. A curse? Really, Lord Ashby, this sounds like something I set right to sell 1,000 copies. What does it mean? Poirot's moustache twitched. Précisément, Mademoiselle Vane. A riddle is not merely poetry. It is a map to the truth. Lord Ashby, explain this throne sets, and this curse. What do the keys unlock? Ashby hesitated, his fingers tracing the parchment's edge. The riddle refers to the sealed chamber beneath Ebon Court, built by Sir Alaric to protect something of immense value. The throne is symbolic, I believe, a reference to power or knowledge. A throne is symbolic, I believe, a reference to power or knowledge. The keys, when united, open the chamber's door. As for the curse, he faltered, his gaze flickering to the guardians. It warns of consequences for those who betray the trust. My family has seen misfortune when the keys were misused. Dr. Edmund Lyle, his spectacles glinting, leaned forward eagerly. Fascinating. A 17th-century covenant, likely tied to the Civil War or the dissolution of the monasteries. Is the chamber a reliquary? A treasury? My studies suggest. Assez, Monsieur Lyle, Poirot interrupted, his tone sharp. Your enthusiasm, it is admirable, but we deal with murder, not manuscripts. The riddle speaks of blood, and blood has been spilled. Tell me, Lord Ashby, how were these guardians chosen? And why was Monsieur Crane, a solicitor, involved? Ashby's expression tightened. The guardians were chosen by their predecessors, as the trust dictates. Each key is passed down, often within families or to those deemed worthy. Crane was my solicitor, tasked with ensuring the legalities of opening the chamber. He knew the riddle but not the chamber's contents. Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, her mourning black stark against her pale skin, spoke softly. And yet he died clutching your key, Lord Ashby. How did he get it? Did you give it to him? The accusation hung in the air. Ashby's jaw tightened. I did not. My key was in my safe. As I told you, someone took it. Mr. Julian Trent, the financier, chuckled darkly. Someone with nimble fingers, then. Or perhaps Crane was poking his nose where it didn't belong. Solicitors are notorious for that. Monsieur Trent, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing, you speak of nimble fingers, yet you are a man of calculation. Did you know Monsieur Crane? Perhaps in matters of finance? Trent's smile was a blade. I met him once in London. A dull man, All ledgers and no spine. If he crossed someone, it wasn't Sitzme. Miss Sophie Durand, her hands clasped tightly, spoke up, her French accent trembling. This riddle, it frightens me. See the blood shall fall sictes. Is it a warning? Are we all in danger because of these keys? Colonel Rupert Blake scoffed, his military bluster barely masking unease. Nonsense, Miss Durand. Riddles don't sit kill. Men do. We should be searching for the weapon, not chasing fairy tales. Poirot raised a hand. None, Colonel. The riddle. It is a clue, not a fairy tale. It tells us the keys are not equal. One binds, one frees, one hides. We must know which key is which. Oh, Lord Ashby, where are the keys now? Ashby gestured to the velvet-lined tray brought by the butler, Graves. 6 keys gleamed there, brass, iron, silver, each unique. Mine is missing, as you know, Ashby said. It was found with Crane. Poirot examined the keys, noting their designs: a raven on Miss Vane's, a cross on Mrs. Harrow's, a spiral on Miss Durand's, a lion on Colonel Blake's, a quill on Dr. Lyle's, and a coin on Mr. Trent's. Curieux, he murmured. Each key, it reflects its guardian. But the keeper's key, what is its symbol? A raven clutching a crown, Ashby replied. It signifies authority over the trust. Poirot sits, eyes gleamed. Bien. And the chamber, where is it? Ashby hesitated. Beneath the manor, accessible only through a hidden door in the crypt. The keys must be used in a specific order, as the riddle implies. The group murmured, their unease growing. Miss Vane lit her cigarette, her hands steadier now. So we start to play a game of keys and riddles with a murderer among us. Delightful. Poirot turned to her, his voice soft but piercing. Mademoiselle, you mock, but you are not immune to fear. I observe your glances at Monsieur Trent, your hesitation when speaking of your novel. What do you hide? Clara Sturt's eyes flashed. I hide nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I stem here for the story. Nothing more. Vraiment, Poirot said, his moustache twitching. We shall see. He addressed the group. Mes amis, the riddle is our guide, but the murder, it is our anchor. Someone killed Monsieur Crane in a locked room with a key that should not have been there. I ask you now to surrender your keys to Lord Ashby for safekeeping until the police arrive. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. Reluctantly, the guardians complied, placing their keys on the tray. Poirot watched closely, noting the hesitation in Mrs. Harrow's fingers, the defiance in Trent's smirk, the tremor in Lyle's hand. As Graves carried the tray away, Poirot's gaze lingered on the fireplace, where the iron box with the raven and key crest stood sentinel. Hastings, he whispered, drawing his friend aside. The riddle, it is not complete. There is a piece missing, a truth hidden in the words. And the keys, they are not all they seem. Hastings frowned. You think one sits a fake, or that the riddle sits a distraction? Poirot sits, eyes gleamed. Mon ami, the riddle is the heart of the mystery, but the murder, it is the key to the riddle. We must find the connection between Crane and the Guardians. Their secrets, they intertwine. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his fingers brushing the tapestry he had noticed the previous day. He pressed the seam, feeling a slight give. "Kiss das très intéressant," he murmured. "Ebon Court, it hides more than chambers. It hides the truth." Outside, the mist thickened, and the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, as if the very stones were waiting for Poirot to unlock their meaning. Chapter 6. A Second Disappearance. The afternoon at Ebon Court was cloaked in an oppressive stillness, as if the manor itself held its breath, wary of what secrets might next be unearthed. The fog outside had thickened, wrapping the Sussex Downs in a grey veil that muffled sound and blurred the edges of reality. Hercule Poirot, ever the master of order amidst chaos, stood in the library, his hands clasped behind his back, his grey eyes scanning the shelves, as if they might whisper the truth about Victor Crane's murder. The Guardian's keys, now locked in Lord Ashby's safe, seemed to pulse with unspoken significance, and the ancient riddle echoed in Poirot's mind. 7 keys by Raven's flight guard the heart of endless night. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but perpetually perplexed, paced near the window. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with unease, "this place gives me the creeps. A man stabbed in a locked room, a cryptic riddle, and now we're all just sitting about waiting for the police. Shouldn't we be doing something?" "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone calm but firm. "We are doing something. We observe, we listen, we think. The little grey cells, they work tirelessly. The murder of Monsieur Crane. It is but the first act. The second, I fear, is upon us." His words proved prophetic. As the clock struck 3, a cry rang out from the upper corridor, not a scream of terror but a shout of alarm, sharp and urgent. Poirot and Hastings rushed toward the sound, joined by Lord Ashby and the remaining guardians, their faces a mixture of dread and curiosity. The cry had come from Miss Clara Vane, who stood outside Miss Sophie Durand's room, her face pale beneath her auburn curls. "She sits gone," Clara exclaimed, her cigarette-holder forgotten in her hand. "Sophie, Miss Durand, she sits not in her room, and the door was ajar. I went to fetch her for tea, and nothing." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he stepped into the room. The chamber was elegant, with a 4-poster bed draped in emerald silk and a violin case resting on a mahogany table. The bed was undisturbed, the pillows pristine, but a single glove lay on the floor, its delicate lace torn. The window was closed, its latch secure, and the key, Sophie's spiral-etched key, was missing from the dresser where she had claimed to keep it. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot murmured, his gloved fingers brushing the glove. "Mademoiselle Durand. She has vanished, and her key with her. This is no coincidence, n'est-ce pas? The pattern, it emerges." Lord Ashby, his face drawn, joined them. "This is intolerable," he said, his voice tight. "First Crane, now Miss Durand. Are we all to be picked off, one by one?" Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, clutching her rosary, whispered, "The curse the riddle warned us. Blood shall fall." "What if Sophie is—" Her voice trailed off, her eyes wide with fear. Colonel Rupert Blake snorted, his military bearing undiminished. "Curse! My foot! Someone sits playing a game, and I stits wager it sits one of us. Where sits that financier, Trent? He sits got a shifty look about him." Julian Trent, leaning against the doorframe, raised an eyebrow. "Careful, Colonel. Accusations are cheap, but proof is costly. I was in the billiard room, alone, when I heard Miss Vaneset's shout. Care to account for your own whereabouts?" Blake bristled. "I was in the conservatory, inspecting the roses. Ashby can vouch for me. He passed through 10 minutes ago." Ashby nodded reluctantly. "I saw the Colonel, yes, but that doesn't explain Sophie Six's absence." Dr. Edmund Lyle, his spectacles fogged with nervous sweat, stammered, "I was in the library, looking for more on the trust. I didn't see Miss Durand after breakfast. She seemed troubled, though. Kept muttering in French about her father." Poirot sits, gaze sharpened. "Interessant, Monsieur Lyle. Troubled, you say? And what of you, Mademoiselle Vane? You found the room empty. But what brought you here?" Clara sits, eyes flickered, but her voice was steady. "I told you. I came to fetch Sophie for tea. We spoken earlier about her music. She was going to play for us tonight. Her door was open, which struck me as odd, so I looked inside. That's all." "Vraiment?" Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And this glove, torn and abandoned, it is hers, oui, yet it suggests a struggle, or perhaps a message. We must search the manor, but carefully. The clues, they are delicate." He knelt to examine the floor, noting a faint scuff mark near the bed, similar to the one in the blue room. His fingers traced the edge of a rug, revealing a polished floorboard that seemed slightly raised. He pressed it, but it did not yield. "Curieux, Jing," he murmured. "Ebon Court. It is a house of secrets, and Mademoiselle Durand, she has been drawn into them." The search began at once, with the guardians splitting into pairs under Poirot's direction. He and Hastings took the west wing, while Ashby and Colonel Blake searched the grounds, Clara and Trent the east wing, and Mrs. Harrow and Dr. Lyle the lower floors. The butler, Graves, was tasked with checking the servants' quarters. Poirot moved with purpose, his eyes scanning every detail: the faded tapestries, the locked cabinets, the portraits of stern-faced Ashbys, whose eyes seemed to follow their every step. "Hastings," Poirot said, as they entered a dusty parlour, "this disappearance, it is no accident. The killer, he grows bold. First Crane, murdered with a key in hand. Now Mademoiselle Durand, vanished with her key. The riddle, it binds these events. One to bind, one to free. Perhaps Sophie's key is the one to free, and someone seeks to prevent it." Hastings frowned, his honest face creased with worry. "But why take her? If they wanted the key, why not just steal it, like with Crane?" "Précisément, mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The key alone is not enough. The guardians, they are part of the trust. To remove one is to disrupt the balance. We must find her, and quickly." Their search yielded little: a broken hairpin in the corridor, a smudge of mud near a side door, and a faint scent of lavender, Sophie's perfume, lingering in the music room. But no sign of the violinist or her key. The other groups returned with similar results. The manor was vast, its passages labyrinthine, and Sophie seemed to have vanished into its shadows. As evening fell, the guardians reconvened in the drawing-room, their faces drawn with fatigue and fear. Poirot stood before them, his small stature commanding the room. "Messieurs," he said, "Mademoiselle Durand's disappearance is no mere mischance. It is deliberate, tied to the murder of Monsieur Crane and the mystery of the 7 keys. I observe your faces, your words, your silences. One of you knows more than you say." Clara Vane lit a cigarette, her hands steady, but her eyes wary. "You said, accusing us again, Poirot. If Sophie Six's gone, maybe she ran off. She was nervous, always fidgeting with that violin case." Mrs. Harrow Sitt's voice was a whisper. "Or she sits dead, like Crane. The curse." "Enough of curses," Colonel Blake snapped. "We need action. not superstition. Poirot, what sits your plan? Poirot's moustache twitched. My plan, Colonel, is to use the little grey cells. The police will arrive soon, but until then we must guard the remaining keys and watch each other closely. The killer, he is among us, and he will strike again if we are not vigilant. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on the iron box above the fireplace, its raven and key crest a silent sentinel. He approached it, his fingers brushing the lock. C'est très vieux, he murmured. The keys, they unlock more than a chamber. They unlock the truth. And Mademoiselle Durand. She is the key to the next revelation. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, and Ebon Court seemed to hum with secrets, as if daring Poirot to unravel them before another life was lost. Chapter 7. The Hidden Passage. The twilight at Ebon Court cast long shadows across the manor's ancient stones, as if the building itself were conspiring to conceal its secrets. The fog outside had not lifted, cloaking the Sussex Downs in a grey mantle that seemed to seep into the very walls, chilling the air and heightening the tension among the guests. Hercule Poirot, his charcoal suit pristine despite the day's turmoil, stood in the music room where Sophie Durand's faint lavender scent still lingered. His grey eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned every detail: the polished grand piano, the velvet drapes, the violin case left askew on a table. The disappearance of Miss Durand, coupled with Victor Crane's murder, had set his little grey cells ablaze. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, hovered nearby, his brow furrowed with worry. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "this place is like a maze. Sophie could be anywhere or worse. She's—" He trailed off, unwilling to voice the fear that hung over them all. "Non, mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone firm, but not unkind. "We must not assume the worst. Mademoiselle Durand is missing. Yes, but her key, it is gone too. This suggests purpose, not merely peril. The manor, it holds the answer. We must look beyond the obvious." As if in answer to his words, a faint creak echoed from the far wall, where a tapestry depicting a raven in flight hung beside a bookcase. Poirot's head snapped toward the sound, his moustache twitching with anticipation. "Secure," he murmured, crossing the room with purposeful strides. He ran his gloved fingers along the tapestry's edge, feeling the wall beneath. A slight draught brushed his skin, and his eyes gleamed. "Hastings, observe this wall. It is not what it seems." He pressed a panel, and with a low groan, a section of the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow stone passage descending into darkness. The air within was damp, carrying the scent of earth and age, and a faint glimmer of light flickered far below, as if beckoning. "Good heavens, Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed, peering into the gloom. "A secret passage. Do you think Sophie went this way?" "Peut-être," Poirot said, his voice low. "But we must proceed with caution. The passage, it is a clue, but also a trap. Fetch Lord Ashby, vite. He must know of this." Hastings hurried off, returning moments later with Lord Ashby, whose silver hair was dishevelled for the first time, his eyes shadowed with strain. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice tight, "a hidden passage. I knew of none in this part of the manor. My ancestors were secretive, but this—" Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Lord Ashby, you are the keeper of the trust. Yet you claim ignorance of your own home. Non. Ebon Court, it is a house of secrets, and you, I think, know more than you say. Come, we explore." Armed with a lantern from the Butler graves, the trio descended the narrow steps, the stone walls pressing close, etched with faint carvings of ravens and keys. The passage twisted downward, its air growing colder, until it opened into a small chamber, its walls lined with crumbling stone. At its center stood a rusted iron gate, locked with a mechanism unlike any Poirot had seen, a circular plate with 7 keyholes, each marked with a symbol matching the guardian's keys. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his eyes alight. "The chamber of the riddle. It is near. This gate, it requires all 7 keys. Oui? But why is it hidden here? And what does it guard?" Ashby sits face paled. "This must lead to the crypt where the sealed chamber lies. My father spoke of it, but I thought it legend. The riddle, Sega the heart of endless night sits, this must be it." Hastings, gripping the lantern, shivered, and Sophie. Could she have found this passage, or been taken here? Poirot knelt, examining the floor. A faint smear of mud, still damp, marked the stone, alongside a single pearl bead, like those on Sophie Sitt's glove. "Interessant," he said. "Mademoiselle Durand. She was here, or someone wishes us to think so. But the gate, it is locked, and her key is gone." He rose, turning to Ashby. "You must summon the guardians. This discovery, it changes everything. The passage, it connects the music room to the crypt, bypassing the main house. The killer, he knows this secret." The guardians were gathered in the library, their faces a mixture of fear and suspicion. Miss Clara Vane, her cigarette holder trembling slightly, spoke first. "A secret passage? How Gothic! Are you suggesting Sophie wandered into it and got lost?" "Non, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice sharp. "This is no accident. Someone led her, or forced her, into that passage. Her key, it is the key to this mystery, perhaps literally." Colonel Rupert Blake, his military bluster fraying, snapped. "This is madness. First Crane, now Sophie. If there sits a passage, we should search it, not stand here theorizing." Mr. Julian Trent Sitt's eyes gleamed with calculation. "A passage to the crypt that sits where the treasure is, isn't it? Ashby, the Sitt's throne sit is in the riddle. Someone sits getting greedy." Mrs. Beatrice Harrow clutched her rosary, her voice a whisper, or desperate. "The curse, it sests real. The keys, they bring death." Dr. Edmund Lyle, his spectacles fogged, stammered, "I said read of such passages in old manors used for smuggling or hiding priests. But why Sophie? She was harmless, just a musician." Poirot Sitt's gaze swept the group. "Harmless, none. Each of you, as guardians, is a link in the chain of the trust. Mademoiselle Durand Sitt's disappearance, it is a deliberate act to disrupt that chain. I ask you now, who among you knew of this passage?" Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The guardians exchanged glances, each denying knowledge, but Poirot noted the flicker of Clara's eyes, the tightening of Trent's jaw, the way Mrs. Harrow's fingers stilled on her beads. "You do not speak, but your silences, they are eloquent. The police will arrive soon, but until then no one leaves this manor." As the group dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. "Mon ami, the passage, it is the key to the killer's method. Crane was killed in a locked room, yet the passage may explain how. And Sophie, her disappearance, it is tied to the crypt. We must watch the guardians closely, for one of them knows more than they admit." He returned to the music room, his fingers brushing the tapestry. The seam was nearly invisible, but a faint scratch mark on the floor betrayed frequent use. Deter you, he murmured. The passage, it is old, yet someone has used it recently. The killer, he moves like a shadow, but Poirot, he sees through shadows. Outside, the fog pressed closer, and Ebon Court's walls seemed to hum with secrets, as if challenging Poirot to unlock the truth before another life was claimed. Chapter 8. Whispers in the Library. The library of Ebon Court, with its towering shelves and the musty scent of ancient books, seemed to hold the weight of centuries within its walls. As evening descended, the fog outside thickened, casting a ghostly pallor through the tall windows where the last light of day struggled to penetrate. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, precise figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion that had gripped the manor since Sophie Durand's disappearance and Victor Crane's murder. The guardians, summoned once more, sat in a tense circle, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, each a mask of guarded secrets. Captain Hastings, stationed by the door, clutched his notebook, his honest face creased with anxiety. "Poirot," he whispered, "this lot set's ready to tear each other apart. That passage you found, its set's got them rattled. Do you think Sophie set's still alive?" "Mon aim," Poirot replied softly, his grey eyes scanning the group. "Hope, it is a delicate thing, but we must cling to it. Mademoiselle Durand's set's fate, it is tied to the keys, and the keys, they are tied to the truth. Observe Hastings, and listen. The library, it will speak tonight." The air was charged with unease, the silence broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant moan of the wind. Lord Ashby, his silver hair catching the firelight, stood by the mantel, his expression one of weary authority. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice strained, "the police are delayed by the fog, but we cannot sit idle. Miss Durand's disappearance, the passage you found. What does it mean? Are we all in danger?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Danger! Oui, Lord Ashby, but also opportunity. The passage to the crypt. It reveals the killer's method. The riddle. It guides us to the motive. But first, we must address the secrets among you. Messieurs et mesdames, the time for concealment is over. Speak, or the truth will be forced from you." Miss Clara Vane, her auburn curls glinting, lit a cigarette with a defiant flick of her lighter. "Oh, bravo, Poirot," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think we're all hiding something? Well, I'll start. I didn't trust Sophie Durand. She was too quiet, always clutching that violin case like it held state secrets. And Trent," she turned to the financier, her eyes narrowing. "You were awfully chummy with her yesterday, whispering in the garden. Care to explain?" Julian Trent's smile was cold, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "Chummy, Miss Vane. I was being polite. Sophie was nervous, muttering about her father and some debt. I offered a sympathetic ear, nothing more. You, on the other hand, were snooping around the music room before she vanished, writing another chapter for your novel, or something else." Clarissette's face flushed, but before she could retort, Colonel Rupert Blake slammed his fist on the table. "Enough bickering. This is a military matter now. Discipline, order. Someone sits picking us off. And I say it sits you, Trent. You sits got the look of a man who sits kill for profit." Trent's eyes gleamed with amusement. "And you, Colonel, have the temper of a man who sits kill for honor. Where were you when Sophie went missing? Polishing your medals or sneaking through that passage?" Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, Her mourning black stark against her pale skin rose, her rosary beads clicking. "Stop it, all of you," she cried, her voice trembling. "This is the curse at work. The riddle warned us. Betray the trust and blood shall fall. Sophie betrayed it, didn't she? She ran, or worse." Dr. Edmund Lyle, his spectacles fogged, stammered. "Betrayed? How? She was just a musician. I was researching the trust, and I found something." He stopped, his eyes darting to Ashby, then to Poirot. Poirot pounced, his voice sharp. "Poirot, Monsieur Lyle, you found something? Speak, or the little grey cells, they will deduce it for you." Lyle swallowed, pulling a small leather-bound notebook from his pocket. "I was reading in the library last night, old records about the Ashby family. There's a ledger from 1623, the year the riddle was written. It mentions a guardian's betrayal. One of the original 7 tried to steal the chamber's contents. They were executed." A murmur rippled through the group. Ashby-Sitt's face darkened. "That ledger is private, Lyle. You had no right to pry." Poirot-Sitt's eyes gleamed. "None, Lord Ashby. Monsieur Lyle-Sitt's curiosity, it is most useful. A betrayal, you say. And now, a murder and a disappearance. The pattern, it repeats. Tell me, what else did this ledger reveal?" Lyle hesitated, then continued. "It said the chamber holds the falls the heart of the raven, something so powerful it could see reshape destinies, but its sept's guarded by traps, mechanical, not mystical. The keys must be used in the right order, or the chamber seals itself forever." Clara laughed, a brittle sound. "Traps. How melodramatic. Next, you still say the chamber sips full of gold or cursed jewels. Or knowledge," Poirot said softly. "Power. It is not always gold, Mademoiselle Vane. The riddle speaks of a throne, of truth in stone. But let us return to Mademoiselle Durain. Her disappearance, it is no accident. Someone here knows where she is." The confrontation erupted. Clara accused Trent of greed, Trent mocked Blake's temper, and Mrs. Harrow whispered of curses. Ashby tried to restore order, but the room descended into chaos, until a faint metallic clink sounded from the corner. All eyes turned as Poirot knelt, retrieving a small silver hairpin from beneath a chair. It was identical to the one found near Sophie's room. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, holding it up. "This hairpin, it is Mademoiselle Durand-Sitt's. It was not here this morning. Someone placed it perhaps to mislead, or perhaps in haste." Mrs. Harrow gasped. "She was here, in the library." "Or someone wishes us to think so," Poirot said, his gaze sweeping the group. "This hairpin, it is a clue, but also a challenge. The killer, he grows careless." He turned to the bookshelf, where he had found the hidden passage, his fingers probing the seam. "This library, it connects to the music room, and thus to the crypt. The hairpin, it suggests movement. Someone entered or left through the passage recently." Colonel Blake scoffed. "You see it grasping at straws, Poirot. A hairpin proves nothing." "Au contraire, Colonel," Poirot said, his voice like steel. "It proves someone was here, someone who knew Sophie Sett's habits. I ask you all, where were you this afternoon, before Mademoiselle Vane found Sophie Sett's room empty?" The alibis were shaky. Clara in her room, writing, Trent in the billiard room, Blake in the conservatory, Mrs. Harrow in the chapel, praying, Lyle in the library reading. Ashby claimed to have been in his study, but his eyes avoided Poirot's. The butler, Graves, confirmed he had been overseeing the servants, none of whom reported seeing Sophie. Poirot's mind raced, cataloguing the inconsistencies. Mes, amis, he said. The hairpin, the passage, the ledger, they are threads in a tapestry. The killer, he weaves a clever web, but Poirot, he sees the pattern. We must guard the keys and each other. For the next move, it will be bold. As the group dispersed, their whispers echoing like ghosts, Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the iron box above the fireplace. He approached it, noting a faint scratch on its lock, as if someone had tried to force it. "After très intéressant," he murmured. "The library, it is the heart of Eboncourt's secrets, and the hairpin. It points to a truth we have yet to grasp." He turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, the killer is among us." And they grow desperate. The riddle, the keys, the passage, they all lead to the crypt. We are close, but the danger, it is closer. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, and Eboncourt seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if daring Poirot to unravel its secrets before another blow fell. Chapter 9. The Stolen Key. The night at Eboncourt was a tapestry of shadows, woven with the threads of fear and suspicion that seemed to tighten around the manor's inhabitants with each passing hour. The fog outside clung to the windows, its grey fingers pressing against the glass as if eager to join the drama unfolding within. Hercule Poirot, his charcoal suit as immaculate as ever, stood in Lord Ashby's study, a small oak-panelled room dominated by a heavy desk and the iron safe where the guardian's keys were now kept. The discovery of the hidden passage and Sophie Durand's disappearance had set his little grey cells alight, but a new event was about to cast the mystery into sharper relief. Captain Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, shifted uncomfortably, his honest face etched with worry. "Poirot," he whispered, glancing at the safe, "you sit, sure it sits secure. After Crane Sip's murder and Sophie Sip's vanishing, I don't like the idea of those keys sitting there like bait." "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice low but firm, "the safe, it is but a temporary guardian. The true security lies in the mind of Hercule Poirot. But you are right to be cautious. The killer, he is bold, and the keys, they are his obsession." As if to mock Poirot's confidence, a sharp cry echoed from the corridor, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Lord Ashby burst into the study, his silver hair dishevelled, his eyes wide with alarm. "Monsieur Poirot," he gasped. "The safe my key, the keeper Sest's key, it's Sest's gone." Poirot's moustache twitched, his grey eyes narrowing. "Quoi? Gone? Impossible. Show me, vite." The trio hurried to the safe, a sturdy iron box embedded in the wall behind a portrait of a stern-faced Ashby ancestor. The safe's door was ajar, its lock unblemished, and the velvet-lined tray inside held only 5 keys, those of Miss Vane, Mrs. Harrow, Colonel Blake, Dr. Lyle, and Mr. Trent. The keeper's key, with its raven and crown emblem, was missing, despite the safe having been locked and guarded since Sophie's disappearance. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his gloved fingers tracing the safe's edge. "The key, it vanishes under our noses, yet the lock, it is untouched. This is a theft of great cunning. Lord Ashby, who had access to this safe." Ashby's face was ashen. "Only myself and Graves, the butler. The combination is known to no one else. I checked the safe an hour ago after dinner, and it was secure. I swear it." Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the heavy curtains, the locked window, the polished floor free of scuff marks. "Curieux," he said. "A theft in a locked study, a safe unforced, and yet the key is gone. This is no ordinary crime. We must summon the guardians." The remaining guardians were gathered in the study, their faces a gallery of suspicion and fear. Miss Clara Vane, her cigarette-holder poised, arched an eyebrow. "Another key stolen. This is getting tiresome, Poirot. First Crane's found with one, then Sophie vanishes with hers, and now this. Someone's collecting them, aren't they?" Mr. Julian Trent, lounging against the desk, smirked. "Collecting or hoarding? Sounds like someone sits desperate to open that chamber before the rest of us. Care to confess, Colonel?" Colonel Rupert Blaketet's face reddened, his military bluster barely contained. "Watch your tongue, Trent. I was in the billiard room, playing a solitary game. I step no interest in skulking about like a thief." Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, her rosary beads clicking, whispered, "It sets the curse. The raven sets curse. Taking the keys one by one, we set doomed, all of us." Dr. Edmund Lyle, his spectacles fogged with nervous sweat, stammered, But the safe was locked. I was in the library, reading more about the trust. I found a reference to a Seamaster key sept, one that might override the others. Could it be? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A master key. Interessant, Monsieur Lyle. Tell me more of this discovery." Lyle fumbled with his notebook. "It sits in a chronicle from 1650, buried in the library. It mentions a key held by the keeper that can unlock the chamber alone, but at great risk. It sits vague, but it warns of fisa price paid in blood." Clara laughed, a brittle sound. "More riddles and curses? Honestly, Lyle, you sit worse than my publisher. Poirot, what do you make of this?" Poirot's voice was calm but piercing. "Mademoiselle Vane, I make of it that someone among us knows more than they admit. The theft of the keeper's key. It is no mere larceny. It is a challenge to the trust, to the riddle, to Poirot himself. I ask you all, where were you in the last hour?" The alibis were predictably vague. Clara in her room, writing, Trent in the billiard room with Blake, though they played separately, Mrs. Harrow in the chapel praying, Lyle in the library, and Ashby in the drawing room, alone. Graves, summoned for questioning, claimed to have been overseeing the servants' duties in the kitchen. Each alibi was flimsy, unsupported by witnesses, and Poirot's mind catalogued the inconsistencies. "Mes amis," he said, addressing the group, "the thief, he is clever, but not invisible. The study, it is locked. The safe unforced, yet the key is gone. This suggests knowledge of the manner, of the safe, of the trust. I observe your faces, your gestures. One of you is not what you seem." He turned to the safe, examining it closely. A faint smudge of powder, talcum perhaps, marked the handle, barely visible. "C'est très curieux," he murmured. "The thief, he is careful, but not careful enough. This powder, it is a clue. Who among you uses talcum?" The guardians exchanged glances, but none admitted to it. Mrs. Harrow's hands tightened on her rosary, and Trent's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Poirot filed the observation away, his mind racing. He moved to the portrait concealing the safe, noting a slight misalignment. "Hastings," he whispered. "The portrait, it has been moved recently. The dust, it is disturbed. Someone entered this study, perhaps through another means." Hastings frowned. "Another passage, like in the music room." "Peut-être," Poirot said. his eyes scanning the walls. He pressed a panel near the fireplace, but it did not yield. The manor, it is a labyrinth of secrets. The thief, he knows its ways. He addressed the group once more. Messieurs et mesdames, the stolen key, it is a step toward the chamber, but also toward the killer Sipt's undoing. We must search the manor again, focusing on the crypt. The passage we found, it leads there, and I suspect Mademoiselle Durand is not far. As the guardians dispersed, their whispers sharp with accusation, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on the desk. A single sheet of paper, tucked beneath a blotter, caught his eye. He retrieved it, revealing a sketch of the 7 keyholes from the crypt's gate, with a note in Ashby's hand. The order is the key to salvation. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. The riddle, the keys, the passage, they all converge. The thief, he seeks to unlock the chamber. But why? And Mademoiselle Durand, she is the missing piece. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, the game grows dangerous. The thief is among us, and the stolen key, it is the spark that will ignite the truth or destroy it. Outside, the fog swirled, and Ebon Court seemed to hum with a malevolent energy, as if the manor itself were watching, waiting for Poirot to unravel its deadly secrets. Chapter 10. The Ghost of Ebon Court. The night at Ebon Court was a canvas of darkness, punctuated by the restless flicker of gas lamps and the oppressive weight of the fog that pressed against the manor's ancient windows. The theft of the keeper's key from Lord Ashby's safe had cast a pall over the already tense gathering, and the absence of Sophie Durand, coupled with the murder of Victor Crane, had frayed the nerves of the remaining guardians. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the manor's gloom, stood in the grand hall, his grey eyes scanning the portraits of long-dead Ashbys, their painted gazes seeming to mock the living with silent secrets. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, but increasingly unnerved, paced nearby, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. "Poirot," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath, "this place is getting to me. First a murder, then Sophie's disappearance, now a stolen key, and I swear I heard footsteps in the corridor last night, but no one was there. It's as if the manor's haunted." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "You, let the atmosphere of Ebon Court cloud your judgment. Footsteps, oui, but ghosts? No, no. Hercule Poirot deals in facts, not fancies. The little grey cells, they tell me there is a human hand behind these events, however cleverly disguised." His words were tested almost at once. A low, mournful wail echoed through the hall, rising and falling like a distant lament. The sound was faint, yet it sent a shiver through the air, as if the manor itself were grieving. Hastings froze, his eyes wide. "Good Lord, Poirot, what was that?" Before Poirot could respond, Mrs. Beatrice Harrow appeared, her mourning black blending with the shadows, her rosary beads clicking furiously. "It sits the curse," she cried, her voice trembling. "The raven sits curse, as the riddle warned. We sit doomed, all of us." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Madame Harrow, compose yourself. A sound? It is not proof of the supernatural. We must investigate its source. Where did it come from?" Mrs. Harrow pointed toward the west wing, where the music room and the hidden passage lay. "They're near Sophie Sit's room. I heard it before last night, but I thought it was the wind." Poirot Sit's eyes gleamed. "Interessant. The west wing, it is the heart of our mystery. Come, Hastings, Madam Harrow, we shall see what Ebon Court whispers to us. The trio moved swiftly, joined by Lord Ashby and the other guardians, who had been roused by the sound. Miss Clara Vane, her cigarette-holder forgotten, looked pale but defiant. A ghost? Now, really, this is beyond absurd. That's probably the pipes, or that butler sneaking about. Mr. Julian Trent, his usual smirk absent, shook his head. Pipes don't wail. Miss Vane, I heard it too, and I was in the billiard room. That's not natural. Colonel Rupert Blake, his military posture rigid, scoffed. Nonsense. A Sepp heard worse in the trenches. Wind, echoes, nothing more. Let Sepps not lose our heads. Dr. Edmund Lyle, clutching his notebook, stammered, I read about this in the Ashby Chronicles. There sits a legend of a sea-weeping raven, sits a spirit tied to the trust. It appears when the keys are misused. Poirot's gaze was sharp. Monsieur Lyle, your legends, they are fascinating, but I seek evidence, not stories. Let us go to the West Wing. The group reached the music room, where the tapestry concealing the hidden passage hung undisturbed. The wail came again, softer now but unmistakable, emanating from behind the wall. Poirot pressed the panel, and the bookcase swung open, revealing the stone passage descending to the crypt. The air was colder, the scent of damp earth stronger, and the wail seemed to rise from the depths. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, taking a lantern from Graves, who had appeared silently. The sound, it comes from the crypt. We must descend, but with care. The killer, he uses the Manuscript's secrets to sow fear. The group hesitated, but Poirot's authority brooked no dissent. He led the way, followed by Hastings, Ashby and the Guardians, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the carved raven and key motifs along the walls. The passage was narrow, its steps worn smooth by centuries, and the wail grew fainter as they descended, replaced by an eerie silence. At the iron gate with 7 keyholes, Poirot paused, his lantern illuminating the symbols raven, cross, spiral, lion, quill, coin, and crown. Sist, ici, he said. The chamber is beyond, but the gate it remains locked. The wail, it was meant to draw us here, or to warn us away. Mrs. Harrow clutched her rosary, whispering, It sits the ghost of the betrayed guardian from the ledger. It knows we sit close to the truth. Clara Vane rolled her eyes. Accused don't stay. Steal keys. Mrs. Harrow. Someone stay. It's playing tricks. And I stay. Wager it stay. It's to keep us from that chamber. Trent's voice was low, or to get there first. The keeper set's key is gone, and Sophie set's too. Someone set's got 2 pieces of the puzzle. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Precisement, Monsieur Trent. The wail, it is a distraction, but also a clue. Listen, there is no echo now. It was deliberate, made by a living hand. He knelt, examining the floor. A faint smudge of chalk dust marked the stone, and near it a single string from a violin, delicate and out of place. Mon Dieu, Poirot said, holding up the string. Mademoiselle Dorin, she was here, or someone wishes us to think so. This string, it is from her violin. The killer, he leaves breadcrumbs, but they lead to a trap. Colonel Blake growled. Enough riddles, Poirot. If someone sits down here, we should search the crypt, not chase violin strings. Poirot's voice was like steel. "Patience, Colonel. The crypt, it is vast, and the killer, he knows its secrets. We search, but with method. The whale, the string, the stolen key, they are part of the same design." The group explored the crypt, a cavernous space lined with ancient tombs, their inscriptions faded but bearing the Ashby crest. The air was heavy, the silence oppressive, and no trace of Sophie or the missing keys was found. But Poirot's sharp eyes caught a detail, a loose stone in the wall, behind a tomb. He pressed it, revealing a small niche containing a folded paper. It was a sketch of the gate's keyholes, with a note in an unfamiliar hand, "The spiral frees, the crown binds." "Dios te stenteressen," Poirot murmured. "The riddle, it speaks through this note. Sophie Sitzti, the spiral, it is the one to free. The keeper Sitzti, the crown, it binds. The thief, he knows this, and he seeks to control the chamber." Ashby Sitz's face was grim. "This is my family Sitz's legacy, Poirot. If the chamber is opened out of order, the traps Lyle mentioned could destroy everything." Trent Sitz's eyes gleamed. "Or release everything. Power, wealth, whoever sits behind this isn't Sitz afraid of traps." Poirot turned to the group, his voice commanding, "Mesdames et messieurs, the ghost of Ebon Court is no spirit, but a human mind, cunning and desperate. The whale, it was a lure, and this note, it is a taunt. We must guard the remaining keys and watch each other closely. The killer, he is close, and his next move will be his last mistake." As they ascended to the manor, the wail sounded once more, fainter now, as if mocking their efforts. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues, the violin string, the chalk dust, the note, the stolen keys. "Hastings," he whispered, "the killer plays a dangerous game, but Poirot, he plays better. The crypt, it holds the truth, and we are close to unlocking it." The manor seemed to watch them, its shadows deeper, its secrets heavier, as if Ebon Court itself were daring Poirot to solve its mystery before another life was lost. Chapter 11. The Gathering Storm. The drawing-room of Ebon Court was a theatre of shadows, its chandeliers casting a fractured light that seemed to mirror the fractured trust among the manor's inhabitants. The fog outside had thickened into a dense curtain, isolating the estate from the world beyond, as if Ebon Court were a ship adrift in a sea of secrets. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's centre, his small, precise figure commanding attention, his grey eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man who saw not just faces but motives, lies and truths hidden in plain sight. The guardians, Miss Clara Vane, Mr. Julian Trent, Colonel Rupert Blake, Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, and Dr. Edmund Lyle, sat in a tense semicircle, with Lord Ashby by the fireplace, his silver hair catching the firelight like a beacon of authority now dimmed by fear. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his notebook clutched tightly, his honest face etched with anticipation. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a blend of silk and steel, "we are gathered in the shadow of murder, disappearance and theft. Monsieur Victor Crane lies dead, stabbed in a locked room with the keeper's key in his hand. Mademoiselle Sophie Durand has vanished, her key with her, and now the keeper's key, stolen from a locked safe, mocks our efforts. The riddle of the 7 keys guides us, but the killer, he seeks to outwit us. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will lay bare the truths we have uncovered, and in doing so, I shall provoke the culprit to reveal themselves." A murmur rippled through the group, their faces a gallery of unease. Clara Vane, her cigarette holder poised, arched an eyebrow. A performance, Poirot. I hope it sits more entertaining than your accusations. Get on with it. What truths? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his controlled excitement. Mademoiselle Vane, your impatience, it is noted, but the truth, it requires method. Let us begin with the murder of Monsieur Crane. He was found in the Blue Room, locked from within, clutching Lord Ashby's key. Yet, Dr. Lyle, to whom the room was assigned, was in the library. The passage we found, it connects the music room to the crypt, and I propose it also connects to the Blue Room through a hidden panel. The killer, he used this passage to enter, kill, and escape, leaving the room sealed. Colonel Blake scoffed, his military bluster fraying. A passage. That sips your theory. Why not just pick the lock? You stir making this too complicated, Poirot. None, Colonel, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. Simplicity is the killer's mask. The passage explains the impossible, how Crane was killed in a locked room, how the keeper's key was placed in his hand. But why? To sow confusion, to point suspicion at Lord Ashby, or perhaps to suggest the key was the motive. Mr. Trent, his smile sharp as a blade, leaned forward. A clever theory, Poirot. But it doesn't stet explain Sophie. She sits gone. Key and all. If the killer sits after the chamber, why not just take her key and leave her? Poirot's gaze was piercing. Monsieur Trent, you ask the right question, but your tone, it betrays calculation. Mademoiselle Durand's disappearance, it is not merely about her key. The riddle, one to bind, one to free, suggests her spiral key is vital. Perhaps she was taken to ensure the chamber cannot be opened, or to force her to reveal something about her key. Mrs. Harrow, her rosary beads clicking, whispered, "The curse, it sets taking us one by one." Sophie, she was afraid, always praying. She knew something, didn't she? Dr. Lyle, his spectacles glinting, nodded nervously. She mentioned her father, said he warned her about the trust. I found a note in the library about a Tea Guardian sect's betrayal in 1623. Maybe Sophie Sitt's father betrayed the trust, and she sits paying the price. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Très bien, Monsieur Lyle. Your research. It is invaluable. The ledger, the note in the crypt, the violin string, they all point to a pattern. The killer knows the trust's history, its secrets, the theft of the keeper's key. It was no ordinary theft. The safe was unforced, yet the key was taken. I found talcum powder on the handle, a clue to the thief's identity. Clara Sitt's laugh was brittle. Talcum? Really, Poirot? You sit clutching at straws. Half the women here use it, and probably the men too. Perhaps, mademoiselle, Poirot said, his voice soft but cutting. But the powder, it is specific, and the thief, he is careless. I observe also the sketch found in the crypt, the spiral frieze, the crown binds. The killer seeks to control the chamber, but he needs all 7 keys, or perhaps the master key Monsieur Lyle mentioned. Lord Ashby, his face pale, spoke up. The master key is a myth, Poirot. My family Sitt's records speak only of the 7. The chamber Sitt's traps will destroy anyone who tries to open it without the correct order. Poirot nodded. Précisément. The order, it is the key to the riddle. But let us consider the guardians. Each of you has a motive. greed, fear, revenge. Mademoiselle Vane, your novel. It mirrors this mystery too closely. Monsieur Trent, your whispers with Mademoiselle Durand suggest more than sympathy. Colonel Blake, your temper hides a deeper wound. Madame Harrow, your grief, it is perhaps a mask. And Monsieur Lyle, your curiosity, it borders on obsession. The room erupted in protests. Clara flung her cigarette holder down, her eyes blazing. You sit here accusing us all, Poirot. I write fiction, not murder. Trent Set's smirk vanished. Watch yourself, Poirot. I set no patience for slander. Blake Set's fist clenched. I sept served my country, not some cursed trust. You sept no proof. Mrs. Harrow Sipt's voice was a whisper. My grief is real, monsieur. You set cruel to suggest otherwise. Lyle stammered. I stammer scholar, not a killer. I only want to understand the trust. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Mes amis, I accuse no one yet. I reveal what I see, to stir the truth. The killer, he is among us, and my words, they will provoke a mistake. I ask you now to remain in this room, under Hastings' watch, while I examine the study once more. The stolen key, it is close. As the guardian settled uneasily, Poirot slipped into the study, his eyes scanning the safe, the portrait, the desk. A faint scratch on the floor near the bookcase caught his attention, a mark not there before. He pressed the panel, and with a soft click, a narrow section opened, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a single pearl bead, identical to those on Sophie's glove. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. The study, it connects to the passage. The thief, he moves through the manor's veins, but he leaves traces. He pocketed the bead, his mind racing. The killer was growing reckless, and the storm was gathering. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot addressed the group. Messieurs et mesdames, a new clue confirms the killer's path. The study, like the music room, hides a passage. The thief used it to steal the key, and I believe Mademoiselle Durand is still within these walls. We must search the crypt again, but together, for safety. The guardians exchanged wary glances, their trust eroded as they prepared to move. A faint creak sounded from the corridor, and the gas lamps flickered, casting the room into momentary darkness. Mrs. Harrow gasped, and Clara whispered, "The ghost." Poirot Sit's voice cut through the tension. No ghosts, only shadows. The killer, he watches, but Poirot watches closer. The storm, it is here, and the truth, it will break. The manor seemed to hold its breath, its secrets pulsing in the walls, as Poirot led the group toward the crypt, knowing the killer's next move was imminent. Chapter 12: The Final Key. The crypt beneath Ebon Court was a realm of shadows, its stone walls etched with centuries of secrets, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and forgotten time. The flickering light of lanterns cast grotesque shapes across the tombs, where the raven and key motif of the Ashby family seemed to watch with silent judgment. Hercule Poirot led the group. Lord Ashby, Miss Clara Vane, Mr. Julian Trent, Colonel Rupert Blake, Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, and Dr. Edmund Lyle down the narrow passage from the music room, his small, precise figure a beacon of resolve amidst the growing storm of fear and suspicion. Captain Hastings followed close behind, his notebook clutched tightly, his face pale but determined. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said, his voice steady despite the oppressive atmosphere, "we stand at the heart of Ebon Court's mystery. The crypt, it holds the chamber of the 7 keys, and the killer he seeks to unlock it. The theft of the keeper's key, the disappearance of Mademoiselle Durand, the murder of Monsieur Crane, they all converge here. Tonight, we uncover the purpose of the final key. Lord Ashby, his silver hair gleaming in the lantern light, gestured to the iron gate ahead, its 7 keyholes glinting ominously. "The chamber is beyond," he said, his voice strained. "What, without all 7 keys, in the correct order, the traps will ensure no one enters or leaves alive." Oh. Clara Vane, her auburn curls catching the light, lit a cigarette, her hand steady, but her eyes wary. "And you expect us to just walk into a trap-filled chamber? Poirot, you sitch, mad if you think the killer sit's going to reveal himself here." Mr. Trent Sit's smirk was cold. "Or herself, Miss Vane. Let Sit's not pretend you sit her above suspicion. You sit been awfully keen to point fingers." Colonel Blake Sit's voice was a growl. "Enough squabbling. If there sits a killer, let Sit's flush them out. I say we try the keys we have, force the issue." Mrs. Harrow clutched her rosary, her voice a whisper. "The curse, the riddle said blood shall fall. Stead we shouldn't tempt fate." Dr. Lyle, his spectacles fogged, clutched his notebook. The ledger mentioned traps, gears, blades, a collapsing floor. The order of the keys is critical. The note in the crypt said, "The spiral frees, the crown binds, the suffix's key, the spiral, it suffix vital." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Precisement, Monsieur Lyle. The spiral key, it is the one to free, and the keeper's key, the crown, it binds. But we have only 5 keys now. The killer, he holds the others, and he is here, watching." His gaze swept the group, noting Clara's defiant stare, Trent's calculated calm, Blake's clenched fists, Mrs. Harrow's trembling hands, and Lyle's nervous fidgeting. He approached the gate, examining the keyholes. Each was marked with a symbol: raven, cross, spiral, lion, quill, coin, crown. "C'est curieux," he murmured. "The riddle. It guides us, one to bind, one to free, one to hide what none should see. The spiral, it frees the gate, but the crown, it binds the chamber. The killer seeks to control both." As he spoke, a faint scraping sound echoed from the shadows beyond the gate, followed by a muffled cry, faint but unmistakably human. Hastings gasped. "Poirot, that sits Sophie. She sits alive." Mrs. Harrow crossed herself, whispering, "A miracle or a trap?" Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Calmez-vous." A cry, it is deliberate, meant to lure us. The killer, he knows we are close. "Lord Ashby, the keys, bring them." Ashby produced the velvet-lined tray, holding the 5 remaining keys. Poirot took the spiral key, Sophie's, now in their possession, though its absence from her room suggested it had been recovered. "Mon Dieu," he said, holding it up. "This key, it was found in the music room after Mademoiselle Durand's disappearance, hidden beneath the violin case. The killer, he made a mistake." Clara, 6 eyes, narrowed. "You sat saying Sophie left it behind, or someone planted it." "Perhaps both, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice sharp. "The killer, he is cunning, but not infallible. We shall use this key, but with care." He inserted the spiral key into its keyhole, turning it slowly. A low click echoed, and the gate shuddered, but did not open. The other keyholes remained locked, their symbols glinting mockingly. Another cry sounded, closer now from beyond the gate. "Help, please." It was Sophie's voice, weak but clear. Blake surged forward. "Blast it, Poirot. She sits in there. We can wait." "None." "Colonel," Poirot snapped, his authority absolute. "Rush in, and we trigger the traps. The riddle. It demands order." The note said, "Do the spiral freeze. The crown binds. We need the keeper sept's key." Trent Sept's voice was low, and its sept's gone stolen. "Convenient, isn't it, Ashby? Your key keeps turning up in the wrong hands." Ashby Sept's face darkened. "I Sept's no part in this, Trent. The safe was locked, the study secure. Someone here is a thief and a murderer." The tension snapped like a taut wire. Clara flung her cigarette to the ground, her voice rising. "Enough. We stir all suspects. But I'm tired of this charade. Poirot, if you know something, say it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mademoiselle, I know many things, but the truth, it requires one final piece. The cry. It is Sophie, but also a lure. The killer, he wants us to open the gate, to spring the trap. I propose a test." He turned to the group. "Each of you place your key in its keyhole, in the order of the riddle. We shall see who hesitates." The guardians complied, their hands trembling as they inserted their keys: raven, cross, lion, quill, coin. Each turned with a click, but the gate remained shut. The crown keyhole, for the keeper's key, was empty. Sophie's cry came again, desperate now, and a faint grinding sound echoed from within the chamber, as if gears were shifting. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his mind racing. He knelt, examining the gate's sept's base, where a faint smear of blood marked the stone. "Sisters. The killer. He has been here. And recently, the blood. It is fresh." Mrs. Harrow gasped, and Lyle stammered. "Blood. Is it Sophie Sitzer's?" "Not yet, Monsieur Lyle," Poirot said. "But we are close. The killer, he holds the keeper sept's key, and he is in the chamber. We must act swiftly." He turned to Ashby. "The traps, they are mechanical. Can they be disarmed?" Ashby nodded, his face grim. "There sits a lever inside, but it requires the crown key to reach it safely. Without it, the chamber will collapse." Poirot Sixth's eyes gleamed. "Then we force the killer Sixth's hand. Hastings, fetch the crowbar from the blue room. We shall open the gate, but with method." As Hastings hurried off, the group stood in tense silence, the cries from within growing fainter. Poirot watched the guardians, noting Clara's clenched jaw, Trent's calculating gaze, Blake's restless pacing, Mrs. Harrow's whispered prayers, and Lyle's nervous fidgeting. "The killer, he is here," Poirot thought, asterisk, "and he will betray himself." Hastings returned with the crowbar, and Poirot directed Blake to pry the gate. The iron groaned, then swung open, revealing a dark chamber lit by a single flickering torch. At its center stood a stone pedestal, and on it a small iron box with a single keyhole, the crown. Sophie Durand lay slumped against the wall, her hands bound, her face pale but alive. Beside her, a figure in a dark cloak held the keeper's key, poised to insert it. "Arrêtez!" Poirot shouted, his voice echoing. The figure froze, then turned, revealing a face that sent a shock through the group. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, his eyes blazing. "The final key, it unlocks not just the chamber, but the truth." The chamber seemed to hold its breath, as Ebon Court's secrets teetered on the edge of revelation. Chapter 13. The Truth Unlocked. The chamber beneath Ebon Court was a vault of secrets, its stone walls echoing with the weight of centuries, and the flickering torchlight casting shadows that seemed to writhe with the manor's dark history. The iron gate stood open, its 7 keyholes now silent witnesses to the drama unfolding within. Hercule Poirot, his small figure commanding the space, faced the cloaked figure holding the keeper's key, poised to unlock the iron box on the stone pedestal. Sophie Durand, bound and pale but alive, leaned against the wall, her eyes wide with fear and recognition. The guardians, Lord Ashby, Miss Clara Vane, Mr. Julian Trent, Colonel Rupert Blake, Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, and Dr. Edmund Lyle, stood frozen at the chamber's entrance, their faces a tableau of shock and suspicion. Captain Hastings, crowbar in hand, hovered at Poirot's side, his honest face taut with anticipation. "Arrêtez!" Poirot's voice rang out again, sharp and authoritative, halting the cloaked figure's movement. "The game. It is over. The truth, it will be unlocked, not by the key in your hand, but by the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot." The figure turned slowly, the hood falling back to reveal Graves the butler, his gaunt face pale but his eyes burning with a desperate intensity. A gasp rippled through the group, and Mrs. Harrow clutched her rosary, whispering, "The butler, the curse." "Non, madame," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving Graves. "No curse, no ghost, only a man, driven by greed, fear, and a secret long buried. Monsieur Graves, you are the architect of this tragedy. The murderer of Victor Crane, the abductor of Mademoiselle Durand, the thief of the keeper's key, n'est-ce pas?" Graves said, hand tightened on the key, his voice low but defiant. "You accept no proof, Poirot. I accept am a servant, nothing more. Why would I kill?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of triumph. "Pourquoi? Because you are no mere servant, monsieur. You are the last of the betrayed guardians, a descendant of the one executed in 1623 for attempting to steal the chamber's secret. Your family has served the Ashbys for centuries, but not out of loyalty, out of vengeance. The ledger, the riddle, the passages, you knew them all, and you sought to claim the heart of the raven for yourself." Ashby's face paled. "Graves, impossible. He's been with my family since I was a boy." "Précisément, Lord Ashby," Poirot said. "His loyalty was a mask. Let us reconstruct the crime. We, the little grey cells, they have pieced it together." He paced before the pedestal, his voice steady and commanding. "First, the murder of Monsieur Crane. He was killed in the Blue Room, locked from within, clutching your key. But the room was not truly locked. The hidden passage from the music room connects to a panel behind the fireplace, as I confirmed with the scuff marks and the loose stone. Graves, you used this passage, entering the room, while Crane met with someone, likely Mademoiselle Durand, discussing her fears about the trust. You stabbed Crane, placed the keeper's key in his hand to cast suspicion on Lord Ashby, and escaped through the passage, locking the panel behind you. Sophie, her voice weak, nodded. I met Victor that night. He said my father had warned him about the trust, about a traitor among the guardians. I left to get my key, and when I returned, he was dead." Poirot continued. "Exactement. The key, it was a misdirection. Graves, you stole it from the safe earlier, using your knowledge of the Manor 6 secrets. The talcum powder on the safe 6 handle. It was from your gloves, used to mask fingerprints. A small mistake, but fatal. Graves' cyst, eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Clara Vane, her cigarette unlit, stared at him. You, all this time, serving tea and lurking about, why, Sophie? A most excellent question, mademoiselle. Poirot said. Mademoiselle Durand's disappearance, it was to secure her spiral key, the one to free, as the note in the crypt revealed. Graves, you abducted her, hiding her in the crypt, knowing her key was vital to opening the chamber. The wail we heard, the violin string, the hairpin, these were your attempts to sow fear, to make us believe in a ghost or a curse, diverting suspicion. Trent Setz's smirk returned, but it was strained. Clever, Poirot. But what Setz's in the chamber? Why go to all this trouble? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The heart of the raven, Monsieur Trent. The chamber holds not gold, but knowledge, a document, I believe, from the time of Sir Alaric Ashby. Dr. Lyle's research hinted at it. A charter granting the Ashby family immense power, perhaps a claim to lands or titles lost in the Civil War. Graves, your ancestor, was executed for trying to steal it, and you sought to reclaim it, to restore your family's honor, or to sell it. Lyle stammered. The ledger. It mentioned a sea charter of dominion. It could rewrite history, give the Ashbys influence beyond wealth. Ashby shook his head, his voice hoarse. I didn't know. My father spoke only of duty, not power. Graves laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Duty. Your family ruined mine. My great-grandfather was a guardian, betrayed by an Ashby, executed for a crime he didn't start commit. That charter belongs to us, by right. Poirot's voice was like steel. And so you killed, monsieur. You stole the keeper's key, abducted Mademoiselle Durand, and planned to open the chamber tonight, using the chaos to escape. But you underestimated Poirot. The pearl bead in the study, the blood in the crypt, the chalk dust, these were your errors. Graves' cyst composure cracked, his hand trembling as he raised the key. You can stop me, Poirot. The chamber sits mine. Before he could act, Colonel Blake lunged, his military instincts swift. He wrestled Graves to the ground, the key clattering to the stone. Hastings untied Sophie, who sobbed with relief, while Poirot secured the key, his eyes never leaving Graves. Comest fini, Poirot said. The police, they will arrive soon, and you, Monsieur Graves, will answer for your crimes. The chamber, it remains locked, its secrets safe, for now. As Blake and Trent restrained Graves, Poirot turned to the group, his voice softening. Mes amis, the trust, it is a burden, but also a lesson. The keys, they bind you to the past, but the future, it is yours to shape. Mademoiselle Durand, you are safe, and the truth, it is unlocked. Sophie, supported by Mrs. Harrow, whispered, My father. He said the trust was dangerous. I should have listened. Clara lit a cigarette. Her hand steady now. Well, Poirot, you step out. Done my novels. Quite the twist. Trent Setz's eyes gleamed. And the charter? What happens to it? Poirot Setz's smile was enigmatic. That, monsieur, is for Lord Ashby to decide. Ah, but I advise caution. Power it corrupts, and Ebon Court has seen enough blood. As the group ascended to the manor, the fog seemed to lift slightly, as if the manor sip's secrets now exposed had loosened their grip. Poirot lingered, his gaze on the iron box. The heart of the raven, he murmured. It is not the charter, but the greed it inspires. Citest la vérité. The chamber fell silent, its secrets sealed once more, as Poirot's little grey cells claimed their victory. Chapter 14. The Departure from Ebon Court. The dawn broke over Ebon Court with a hesitant light, as if the sun itself were wary of illuminating the manor's secrets. The fog that had clung to the Sussex Downs for days had begun to dissipate, revealing the rolling hills and the stark silhouette of the Gothic estate. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his charcoal suit impeccable, his silver-handled walking stick resting lightly in his gloved hand. The events of the previous night, the unmasking of Graves as the murderer, the rescue of Sophie Durand, and the revelation of the trust's true nature had left the manor in a state of uneasy calm. The police had finally arrived, delayed by the fog, and Graves was now in custody, his confession secured under Poirot's relentless questioning. Yet, for Poirot, the case was not complete until every thread was neatly tied. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stood beside him, his suitcase packed and his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Well, Poirot," he said, adjusting his hat, "you've done it again. Unravelled a devil of a mystery, and not a moment too soon. I'll be glad to see the back of this place. Gives me the shivers." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile softening his sharp features. "Mon ami, Ebon Court. It is indeed a place of shadows, but also of truths. The little grey cells, they have worked tirelessly, and now we may depart with the satisfaction of justice served. But first, we must bid farewell to our hosts." The remaining guardians gathered in the drawing-room, their faces reflecting the toll of the ordeal. Miss Clara Vane, her auburn curls tamed for once, sat with a notebook, already scribbling notes for what she declared would be her most sensational novel yet. Julian Trent, his usual smirk subdued, leaned against the mantel, his eyes calculating but wary. Colonel Rupert Blake stood ramrod straight, his military bearing restored, but his expression softened by gratitude. Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, her mourning black less oppressive in the morning light, clutched her rosary with a newfound calm. Dr. Edmund Lyle, his spectacles polished, held his notebook, his scholarly enthusiasm tempered by the gravity of events. Lord Ashby, the keeper of the trust, stood by the fireplace, the iron box with the raven and key crest behind him, its lock now empty. Sophie Durand, pale but composed, sat beside Mrs. Harrow, her violin case at her feet, a symbol of her survival. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. "The mystery of Ebon Court is resolved, but its lessons they linger. The 7 keys, they were not merely objects, but symbols of trust, duty, and betrayal. Monsieur Graves, he sought to reclaim a legacy stolen from his ancestor, but in his greed he committed murder and abduction. The chamber remains locked, its secret safe, and perhaps that is for the best." Ashby-Sitt's voice was hoarse. "Monsieur Poirot, you Sitt saved us all. The charter, the thick heart of the Raven Sitt, it sets a burden my family has carried too long. I intend to destroy the keys, to end the trust. No more blood will be spilled for it." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming with approval. "A wise decision, Lord Ashby. The power of the charter, it is a temptation too great. Let it remain buried, as Sir Alaric intended." Clara Vane looked up from her notebook, her eyes sharp. "You search sure it search just a charter, Poirot? No gold, no jewels? My readers will be disappointed." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Mademoiselle Vane, the truth It is more valuable than gold, your novel. It will captivate without embellishment. For the human heart, it is the greatest mystery." Trent Sitzt's voice was low. "And what of us, Poirot? The guardians? Are we free of this curse? Or whatever you call it?" "Monsieur Trent," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, "the curse, it was never in the keys, but in the greed and fear they inspired. You are free, but only if you choose to be. The past, it binds us only as long as we allow." Sophie Durand spoke softly, her French accent lilting. "My father, he knew the trust was dangerous. He told me to guard the spiral key, but I never understood why. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for saving me." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, your courage, it was your salvation. The spiral key, it freed you, as the riddle promised. Now, play your music, and let the past rest." Mrs. Harrow, her eyes moist, said, "I thought it was the curse, but it was just human evil. I salt pray for graves, despite everything." Colonel Blake cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "You such a queer fellow, Poirot, but you such got my respect, saved us from a right mess." Dr. Lyle adjusted his spectacles, his voice earnest. "The ledger, the riddle, they settle be my next paper, but I settle leave out the murder, Monsieur Poirot. Some truths are best forgotten." Poirot Sitzt's gaze swept the group. "Mes amis, the truth, it is never forgotten, only understood. The 7 keys, they taught us that trust, when betrayed, becomes a weapon. Guard your hearts, and you guard the future." As the group dispersed, Poirot and Hastings made their way to the front hall, where a car waited to take them to the station. The portraits of the Ashby ancestors seemed to watch, their eyes less stern now, as if relieved of their burden. Poirot paused by the iron box above the fireplace, his fingers brushing its lock. "C'est fini," he murmured. "Ebon Court, it has spoken its last secret." Outside, the air was crisp, the fog lifting to reveal the rolling downs. Hastings, settling into the car, sighed. "Poirot, I shall never understand how you do it. All those clues, the talcum, the violin string, the passages, you saw what we could insect." Poirot's smile was serene. "Mon ami, the little grey cells, they see what the heart hides. The mystery of Ebon Court, it was not the keys, but the souls who held them. Each guardian, each secret, each lie, they formed the pattern. And Poirot, he merely followed it." As the car rolled away, Ebon Court loomed in the distance, its spires piercing the morning sky. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, and spoke softly, almost to himself. Asterisk. "The greatest lock, Hastings, is the human mind, and the greatest key, it is truth. Sister la vie." The manor faded into the mist, its secret sealed, as Poirot's thoughts turned to the next puzzle that awaited his little grey cells.